when you're running down, you're somewhere around a standard marathon and you're looking at your watch and all this stuff. And then there's this solid parade of kids that are screaming and shouting support, but from wheelchairs and stuff. It's like, wow, what? It probably took them more effort to show up here today than for me to get up any other morning of the week. And yeah, they're celebrating this bunch of people running past them. And yet we should be cheering them. So yeah, it's an awesome thing where momentum begets momentum, and it's like the words bandied around all the time were unprecedented times, unprecedented times. And then when you do a home visit to someone who's close to 100, who was fixing tanks while being shelled in Italy, and I'm thinking I still got like 75 results in my inbox. That's not the same as being shelled and having Vesuvius erupt in the same country at the same time. And so it's like you kind of have to figure out that there's incredible power in listening to other people's story that you can reinvest in your story.
Welcome back, friends. Good to be with you again today. I'm your host, Scott Fulton. We spend a lot of time talking about what are the best things to do for our health and longevity. We don't agree on everything, and that's fine because there's still uncertainty around it. But what are we doing it for? What's the purpose of making life better today if we're not really sure where we're going? And that's really what today's show is, more centered around helping you shape some idea of what the future might look like for you. And in order to do that, we don't have good insights typically into what aging looks like. We tend to see it from afar. We tend to have very small samples. We're usually limited to immediate family members. And so I think it's really important to bring in people from time to time who have really, really deep experience talking and working with people at that point in their life. And today's no exception. I have the wonderful honor of sharing Dr. Greg Andreas with you. Greg's approach to aging and the opportunities that await us is really special. Much to be learned from him. I think you'll really enjoy the conversation, and I hope it helps you think about the opportunities that you're going to look forward to that'll put some substance and some purpose behind the choices that you're making today. So with that, let's get on with the show. Greg Andreas, welcome to the Healthspan podcast. Good to be with you, sir. Actually, let me back that up. Dr. Greg Andreas, welcome to the podcast.
Scott, thank you. You're one of my LinkedIn heroes. It's so good to eventually meet you and join you for this time. Thank you.
Well, it's I think part of what, there's certainly a nice cluster of professionals in that circle of people that we interact with, and it's always nice to know that there's others doing kind of the same type of work or surrounding or supportive type work. But it's also for me a way of testing the messages around the things that are out there, and people will tell me if they think I'm getting off track, and we'll have a conversation around it perhaps. What I think interested me in this conversation we're going to have was really this overlap that is interesting in your life, being a marathoner, an ultra marathon, and a palliative care physician. And I think that's a rare combination. I can say that without having to do a lot of fact checking. But at the same time, I think it's a really interesting place to explore that I like to do from time to time. And so let's kind of start with not all the medical stuff or any of that stuff. What got you into running, and kind of how long did that start for you, or what age did that start? And you've obviously continued it through your life.
Yeah, great question, Scott. I started, I'm going to say, during the late part of school and into university. Um, I I really battled at school. I was the kid that was often in the principal's office, and in those days you got corporal punishment if you failed your spelling test or you didn't know your maths timetable. You went to the principal's after you got six, you used to call it six of the best, where you'd bend over and you'd get a cane and stuff like that. And I realized that I wasn't able to remember stuff like other kids. Like people would know the 6 times table or the 10 times, whatever. I couldn't do that stuff and I couldn't give it back fast. And it kind of happened that I recognized that at the same time, there was newspapers, and I started seeing pictures of a young man that was just a bit ahead of me in terms of growth and stuff like that. And he was in Canada, and the black and white pictures were of him doing something absolutely phenomenal. He actually dipped his legs in his prosthesis in the ocean of one side because he basically had cancer and he had a prosthesis on his one side. And he'd undertaken to do a marathon a day to run across Canada. And I was in South Africa seeing this guy doing something that was absolutely phenomenal. And he was just literally 4 years older than me. And I thought, I bet I could probably get up tomorrow morning and not do anything like that, but literally just go for a run. And I recognized that by doing that, I could actually figure stuff out either on the run or later in the day a little bit better than I'd ever been able to before. Because instead of being bombarded by this thing that I didn't know was ADHD and stuff like that, things made sense, and actually getting a lot of ideas is a benefit if they come to you in a way that's orderly and you can sift through things. And I didn't realize that this was helpful. And I ended up entering runs, and there was a whole bunch of really legendary runners in South Africa doing the Comrades Marathon. And people like Alan Robb and Bob de la Mart and Bruce Fordyce. And so I started aspiring to what they were doing. And so the early days of TV, I was literally watching TV and saying, you know what, I'm going to join them. I'm going to be with them one day. And that's kind of how I started it. And I think I really battled at first to get going, but once I got going, I recognized the small steps just added up and added up and added up. It became the hard part was really to sign up and get to the start line. After that, just by doing the steps every day, you'd figure stuff out and just became an absolute joy to get up and see the dawn and get to the start line and get through exams in a way that actually made sense the way I think about stuff, which is basically understanding stuff so that you can actually put pieces together in a more dynamic way. And that's kind of been my life ever since. I've actually just relished trying to figure out what's all out there, learning, reading about a ton of stuff, and then finding how the stuff falls together, often crazily during a run or a walk or after a run and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it went. I guess I'm talking too much, but I got into medicine because I couldn't get into medicine first time. So I ended up being an ambulance attendant and stuff like that. And getting shaking around in the back of an ambulance, where we learned that if you resuscitate a person really well, as early on from either bullet wounds or stabs or whatever, you actually do incredible good work. So the people that I was part of maybe saving back then are grandfathers like me now, and we kind of need different care. But in those days, we realized resuscitate the whole person. It wasn't the bullet wound or the stab wound or
Right.
that was killing them. It was actually them going into shock and their organs getting hypoperfused and their brain dying or their heart dying. And we actually resuscitated and taught to resuscitate eventually as an emerge physician to resuscitate aggressively so that their brain would stay alive or you could fix up what is wrong with them. And that path then led to at where I am now in life, it's the whole person that still matters. It's not the person's pathology or that we need glasses to get through this interview or whatever. We actually will do just fine, both of us wearing glasses and being able to say, this counts for us both. And that's part of it's like, it's not about what's wrong with us, but what actually gives us momentum to get to the start line of today to do this podcast and what will take us into next and next and next. So that's I guess, my story in a little bit of a Reader's Digest nutshell, if you like, Scott.
Yeah, no, that's a nice kind of bookends place for us to have lots of places to explore. So, as you were telling the story about that inspiration for running, I literally had shivers because you're telling the story of Terry Fox. And Terry Fox, you and I, it's interesting to hear people who weren't even on the continent, like let alone outside of Canada. Like that was one thing. And then you kind of hear some Americans know about it, but then to hear about people around the world who he impacted. Yeah, he was one of those. I can tell you exactly where I was the moment I heard he passed because I've been following him every day. So I start getting choked up just thinking about it. Then when I drove across Canada, that was probably the most important stop at Thunder Bay, Ontario, where that massive statue is of him. So yeah, and I think that's actually a really nice way to kind of frame part of what we're going to talk about here is this motivation or inspiration or role model in terms of how we go about our day that inspires others. And I think that gets forgotten a lot of, there's so much people trying to tell us what we should do, right? Versus actually watching those who do it. And I think the example you give as getting the run of people. I'll dissect it a little bit for people who don't know kind of that experience of running to give them some way to identify with it. So you chose some kind of. So what was your first race that you chose to do? In terms of what distance was that?
So I knew to do the Comrades Marathon in those days, you had to qualify with a standard marathon of 4.5 hours. That was the qualifying time.
Okay.
And of course, I was playing soccer and rugby to some extent, but I wasn't running much, and I certainly had no formal real training. But I knew I could do distance, a little bit of distance. And so I remember getting to the end of the qualifying run at I think it's like 4 hours, 11 minutes, knowing that I'd qualified and that's, this was literally age 19 or something. And I was so stiff. It was like, wow, I've got to do two of these suckers back to back through harder terrain than what I've just done today. And the people at university with me at that time, they had this like math equation that said, if you do this time, you're probably not going to finish. And yeah, so it was became this challenge of, you know what, I'm going to keep on doing this and I'm going to enter anyway. And you suddenly find out that if you actually get to one point, you can celebrate it. And you can actually say, gee whiz, you know what, I'm here now. And the Comrades is a beautiful run. I could go into a whole all the stories of the 14 that I did, but there's a place on the run where there's a school where kids go, where they've often got a lot of where they need a lot of support. So often they're in wheelchairs and they've got all kinds of calipers and crutches and all kinds of stuff happening. And they're like near the middle of this thing. So these, when you're running down, you're somewhere around a standard marathon and you're looking at your watch and all this stuff. And then there's this solid parade of kids that are screaming and shouting support, but from wheelchairs and stuff. It's like, wow, you know what? It probably took them more effort to show up here today than for me to get up any other morning of the week. And yeah, they're celebrating this bunch of people running past them, and they are supporting these people doing this thing. And yet we should be cheering them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an awesome thing where momentum begets momentum. And it's like I go back to Terry Fox because I only saw black and white pictures of that time. And that you could almost see the way he was swinging his right prosthesis through on each step. And at the end of the day, we did that big, big smile of his trapped in a black and white picture. It's like, yeah, you know what? At the age of the young man, he's living and he literally died soon after that, but he's accomplished more in his very, very short life. And although his goal was to end cancer or bring about treatments for cancer, which he's done so much work in, he actually supported a guy with ADHD to actually I guess, use his ADHD to actually bring more to, I guess, his life. So in many ways, he didn't cure my cancer, he cured my ADHD to literally help me and bring me, I guess, past marathons that he didn't run. So he ran like 143 of them or something. Yeah, I've done an extra 100 or something, and many of those, like, oh, yeah, this I've never done back to back. But yeah, there's people out there that are far more amazing, and for us to aspire to every day.
Yeah, and I think that's the that's the importance of watching these sort of things unfold in real life, real people who have a goal bigger than themselves. Which I think, if there's something common in, within those in healthcare, certainly on the front line, it's really around doing something bigger than themselves, right? It's what you do for others will ultimately define who you are, not what you do for yourself. That's really what we'll all be remembered for. Yeah, it's a wow. That's an amazing story. But I had not heard anything about that run in terms of what that was involved. It's a yeah. We forget. I worked some with disabled kids when I was young, when I lived in Canada, and it was really, really interesting to exactly to your point, what they face a marathon every day with everything they're going to do, right? It's
Yeah.
hard work for the parents, but the kids face it with joy because they have no choice, right? This is what their life will be, and so celebrate it because the alternative is nothing. It
Yeah.
holds no appeal, and so they quickly adapt. It's a it's an interesting to think about that juxtaposed to you're tapping into one of the things that I kind of came to terms with some time ago with aging was so when I got involved in aging, my focus was really around the loss of mobility, right, or increasing disability or the challenges of mobility, and partly because of the work I was doing in my engineering work allowed me to see that. But it's a and what caused me impatience was when I would see someone who was 80 who was upset and angry because they had a disability, and my first thought always was back to the kids, always back to the kids in wheelchairs, and thinking, you have no idea. You've had 70 years of mobility that they never had an opportunity for. So, but I had to kind of keep that to myself. So I don't talk about that often, but I think in this conversation it will. It's an apt reminder for us all. We get consumed with our own limitations, and if there's a message I give throughout all my talks, it's around none of us, none of us exploit our real capabilities in terms of physical capabilities, and it is so important. But clearly, you started exploiting them early. So it sounds like your first distance race was. I wasn't sure you said the time, but how many kilometers was that?
The Comrades Marathon is usually around 90 Ks. It depends on the route and road closures and stuff. It'll often be between 88 and I think the longest I ran was 91.6, which doesn't sound like a lot extra, but it's on the end. And if and the it used to be a time
Hold on,
limit.
hold on. Let's do the math on that. So that's closing in on 60 miles.
Yeah, so yeah, 56 miles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, is the standard time, and they run it alternating between Pietermaritzburg and Durban, and it started after the First World War in commemoration of the people who didn't come home back to South Africa.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, I suppose you can say, historical perspective and deep metaphor about the race. And so it's run one way one year and the other way the other year. And it's been going like that ever since after the First World War. And so the first marathon runner in will usually be given a message from the other mayor right at the end to kind of ceremoniously hand off.
Right.
And so it's at 11 hours, that there used to be a guy, an official, who stood on the line, not facing the runners, with a pistol in the air, and at the stop with a stopwatch in the other hand. And on the 11th hour after starting the race, they basically fire a shot, and anyone behind them wouldn't get a medal pretty much. And obviously, everyone who got there would, but there was so much, say, camaraderie around how do we help each other.
Yeah.
And that's everything from pedestrians to people along the route basically saying, what can we give you? How can we help you? What do you need? And I remember, I think, just to link back to the story I was talking about earlier, I didn't do a great sort of qualifying run because I really didn't know much about running. But as I was entering Durban on my first run, I was really nicely ahead of schedule and I was really pacing myself really nicely. And I was literally 5, 10 Ks out from the end. And I was really celebrating the fact that I was going to be able to get there if I just kept on going. But I was also feeling pretty flat. And this little kid offered me a potato, a curried potato in her hand. Now, this is South Africa. You got to remember this is South Africa, and this is while Nelson Mandela is still in jail. And this little girl, she was a dark-skinned little girl, and her parents were barbecuing next to the road, and she was offering runners potatoes. And yes, I took the potato and she smiled at me and it's like, you know what? Life is good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I often wonder, like, what is she doing now? Because she was giving someone else something that was really what they needed. And yeah, she was giving something away. And it's like, as I walked away, the taste of masala and the richness of the cumin and that little potato was so good. It's like, you know what? I'm going to keep on doing this. This is good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a,
Yeah.
there are things about being at events like these that for anyone who's never done an event like what we're talking about here, like any large event, there's the what you talk about is that everyone is there to support everyone else. We
Yeah.
have so much of sport is tied up in who's winning and who's not,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which is which is it's part of sport, no question. But to be
Yeah.
part of a community like that where everyone is supporting everyone else, whether they're the first and second across the line or whether they're the last, you wouldn't know the difference,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's a really really healthy experience to put yourself in, and incredibly contagious. The So one of the things you talk about for the amount that you've run, is is it's hours at a time when you're doing that kind of training. So talk to me about that. Must be, I gather, kind of your mindful time. That's a pretty common thing among runners, and I think it's helpful again because when we talk about mindfulness and meditation, everyone thinks it's turn off the world, sit quietly. And it's like, no, that's one of many, many ways to do it because that's much easier to film. So tell me about your kind of, I'll say your mindfulness practice, kind of how does that work for you? As, as obviously you're doing it on the move because you're spending a rare moment in a day sitting talking to me here. So this is not how you spend much of your time, but
Yeah. Yeah. So you're absolutely right, Scott. I think better when I'm moving. And even I'll even often up this desk to a standing desk just so I can stand because I can do that. But every morning is my time to actually, how do I center my days? I can't sit still and do that mindfulness thing or listen to a tape, whatever. I'd much rather hear the birds singing or go to the river and watch a beaver carry a stick or you go somewhere and run somewhere and then come back or go and then go to the hospital or do my day. And that's become part of my life. And I know sometimes people like, you got up at 4 o'clock so you could do all this stuff, so you could be in the hospital at 7:30. I say, yeah, I did that. Yeah, because I'm feeling damn good now. And yeah, that's often the thing of energy begets energy in a way. And you can often share that energy again later with other folk, not in a sort of way that, like, I've got this special thing, but what works for you? Because some people really get a big buzz out of sitting and you know looking for their energy or finding their special place within themselves. I can't do that, and I think that's the thing of like, what matters to you to be the person that you want to be through whatever you find works for you. I'm happy to help with that process and respect that process evolve to as far as it can go, because there's amazing people out there. And I mean, you'll often see these days where professional sports people will do whatever works for them, be it sitting peacefully, listening to a tape. I mean, Usain Bolt's often fist pumps or was seen fist pumping officials and kids and all that stuff. But everyone's got their routine of like, what works for me to show up so that I'm part of the best possible story going forward. Yeah, that's like, I'm always keen to hear what my patients have done in the past that they can re-import into their lives if they've stopped doing it. Because often that's the thing that kind of bolsters them from diagnosis to present. Oh, what's the best possible plan here for future? I don't know. We don't know. Let's think about this together. Aha, this may be helpful. Why don't we try it for 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's it, there are so many things which we're not going to cover them all, no question, but that one of the patterns I've seen, and I'm certainly a clear example of this, of kind of when I went through my transformation, a huge part of it was reconnecting with my youth. And it wasn't the notion of that I was trying to be young. That wasn't. It was just what were the things that I enjoyed doing. That's why I bike. It was something I enjoyed doing as a kid. I discovered it again in my 40s, and it was like, why did I not bike all these years? I can't answer. I've never answered the question. I mean, you get busy and things, but like, why would you stop doing something you loved? And I just, as a kid, explored on my bike. I didn't, I wasn't racing or doing anything like that. And it was years later. I had one run in middle school, or would have been grade 7, where there isn't middle school, where I kind of found my run, and then it was gone as fast as it came. It was a one and done, and it was again decades later before I discovered running in a way that you
Yeah,
describe it. That's like when you're feeling good. It's like there's nothing better, there's nothing more, and absolutely to your point of in terms of cognitively driven. Um, oh boy, it's uh, stuff. You kind of work your stuff out on a
yeah,
run, right? You kind of process it. And once you process it, you've let go of the things that you were kind of, the baggage you were dragging. You realize, okay, I've worked it out. I've done as much as I can with it. It's gone. And now I've got some things I can focus on, that maybe come out of that as a process to say, okay, there's 2 things I need to do. Okay, when I get back, I'm going to go do those 2 things, and you move forward, which when you don't have time, it's amazing how taking time to run or do something like that suddenly clears up time that you would have been wasted chasing stuff that you never could fix, right?
exactly.
So, how did you find your way into palliative care? That's a jump or a leap from the back of an ambulance into palliative care in many, many ways.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's pretty. I'm going to say a marathon is an incredible. I'm going to say narrative of life or a story of life. And not that we slow down at the end of a marathon, but it does take a different sort of pacing to either hold your pace or to recognize what time you have to work with to get to the end line. And often I think of where I'm in my career, I started off with really enjoying the ambulance service and I wanted to do emerge medicine. And then family practice seemed to be a natural fit, especially when I moved to Canada, where you had to do everything. So I'd often fly north and do, run at a nursing station in -30 or something. And the locals were like, this guy's clearly very, very crazy. And they'd still come and see me. It's like, you're like, why does this guy even speak like he's not Canadian, clearly? But it becomes a thing of how do we move through life in a way that actually makes the most sense for what needs to happen next? And I think the part that I recognize now, there's no time to say, this is a time of a start of palliative care. I just had a birthday where I turned 63 a few days ago. And so, by
Happy birthday.
well, thank you. By all sort of statistical data, I should be over 2/3 of my life done. If the national in Canada, we die around 80 to 82, depending on sex and stuff like that, and where you live. So I should only have a short spell left, and yet I am still living very differently from when I could run much faster. But I'm now running slower and enjoying it probably as much, if not more. And it's the same in my professional career where there's no start of palliative care. It's more about how do I actually use my time that I have a full life? And how can I gift that full life to other people so that it's not like, now you're palliative, because that's a load of rubbish. When I see someone at the end of their life in their bed, they are still regarding themselves as living, and yet the medical community and often some of the family are actually saying, George or Bob or Greg one day, he's dying. It's not, no, Greg or Bob or George or Mary are actually still very keen on what matters to them, who their favorite people are, what music they want to listen to. Can they get to the washroom, because that's now the end of a marathon as well. The marathon of dignity doesn't start like, by winning the Comrades Marathon. It's actually by how you show up the next morning after winning the Comrades Marathon and how you go through life. And that's us being able to help each other get to the washroom probably means that a grandchild somewhere down there may say, hey, you know what? Grandpa lived like this. Let me do that as well. And that's, I guess, the Reader's Digest version of how did Greg get into palliative care? He's not in palliative care. He's still living a full life where he wants to live the fullest possible life. And some people call that palliative care. I just call it living. How does that work for you, Scott?
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, there's a common theme amongst, and I think you probably relate to this. There's a brotherhood amongst everyone who's done anything in endurance, and I view endurance something beyond just a marathon. I say just a marathon like it's not a big deal, and it is. But there's a certain point where you've pushed yourself beyond all things you ever imagined. And again, that kind of tapping into what your real capabilities are. So for me, it was doing Ironmans, and it was like, so in the Ironman, you do the 3-mile swim, 112-mile bike, 180 kilometers for you. And then the full marathon, and they really talk about it's the turnaround, or the halfway point of the marathon is really where it all begins. Everything has just been a lead up. So in the same way you're talking about, it's that how are you finishing is really what defines what you're going to take from the experience, or what the experience is going to be measured by. So of things that are common amongst the things that you and I have done will be, we're used to planning for a future self, right? Which is not part of daily life. We're all kind of consumed in the moment, and we don't have this muscle around predicting the future or planning for the future in a way that people in endurance do, because you know that at kilometer 80, you know that your decision making is going to be challenged. You don't have the reserves anymore, that the tank is getting down. You can't afford to have a big mistake at that point when you've come that far. You've done all, and when I say that far, you've done all this training to get there, not just on the day, right? All the training. You're planning for these eventualities and knowing that you can't control everything. And the longer the race, the more things can go wrong, the more that things are out of your control. And that's a lot of what how I view life and aging. And so if we think about we want to get the most out of the whole event, right? Because you see a lot of people go out too fast and then they end up walking and they got their head down and they're just so disappointed. Um, and I'm always feeling bad for those people. I remember one marathon in particular where one guy much younger than I was, but he looked strong and fit. I remember he was really struggling, and I don't think I've ever done this any other time but this once. And I walked with him for about 30 seconds, enough just to kind of check in, come on, like you've got it, whatever the sort of things we say. And I'll be darned if he didn't pass me in the last mile of the marathon. And it just was, again, it goes back to that. I was so delighted, right? I wasn't racing against
Yeah,
him. He wasn't in my age group. And even if he was, it wouldn't matter. Um,
yeah.
yeah, so there are so many things. It sounds like a sales pitch why everybody should do ultra or endurance stuff. And that's not what it is. But there are people like you out there and others that have some gift to learn. And I think that maybe takes us to talking about what can we learn from people who have lived the marathon of life or the ultra of life, right? And that's one of the missions I have with this podcast is to try to provide a way for people to have insights into what are those people who have lived a really good life who we don't ever get to see anymore, right? They've because towards the end of life we tend to shut them off or they become more shut in, just as by virtue of mobility is limited. Um, but they're still very active mentally. They have a lot to share, and also I think they've come to a point in life where they're looking back on a life, and didn't just happen overnight. That's what happens as you get later in life. You start looking back and looking forward. So, what would you kind of maybe have to say around what has impacted you most around kind of the learnings from being around people who have gone through this exercise of looking at their life? What sort of things do they typically have to say and want to share of those who are wanting to offer some wisdom to anyone who will listen?
I think the key is curiosity, because if you're looking for a particular lesson, you're probably not going to find that lesson. You're going to find something else. And I've had I guess the privilege and honor of meeting everyone from Second World War II veterans in the last phases of their life. And boy, the things that they will share about what they learned. And when we've just come through the pandemic, and I mean, the words bandied around all the time were unprecedented times, unprecedented times. And then, when you do a home visit to someone who's close to 100, who was fixing tanks while being shelled in
Yeah,
Italy, and I'm thinking like, yeah, I still got like 75 results in my inbox. That's not the same as being shelled and
yeah,
having Vesuvius erupt in the same country at the same time. And so it's like you kind of have to figure out that there's incredible power in listening to other people's story that you can reinvest in your story. And people have the amazing ability to reinvent their skills in it and surprise you. And around my desk here, people will often give me stuff, or their families will gift me stuff and saying, you don't know this, but Bob was making this for you. And I'll just reach over here. But this is when I first came to Canada. I knew nothing about fishing in Canada. And So I was landed in Manitoba where there's fantastic pickerel and pike fishing and lake trout and stuff like that. And I was keen to learn. And of course, a lot of these people that I was were my patients and neighbors and stuff were avid fisher people. But I was seeing this guy at home and we were talking about fishing pretty well, like what should I be fishing for this time of year, where the fish biting and all this stuff. And eventually he died. And his family eventually brought me this with its beautifully embossed
So
wallet.
describe what it is for those who are just on audio.
Just on, so it's basically a beautifully handmade leather wallet. And inside it, there was a note and it said, this guy's name wanted you to have this. He was making it for you while you were visiting. It's a picture on the outside of beautifully embossed a fisherman landing a fish. And it's like, you know what? I didn't even know he did incredible leather work. We were talking fishing all the time, and of course, we were also
Right.
talking about what was ending his life. But we were talking about what mattered to both of us, and we shared the fishing thing big time. And yeah, I didn't realize that he was actually also a leather and a farmer and all this other stuff. And so we spoke about other stuff, but there's so much, so many lessons about each other and the gifts we can give each other through story and stuff like that never makes up for the thing of like, how do I actually just listen curiously for that lesson that this person can share? And sometimes if I ask them about a specific thing, I may actually put a blinker on what I may actually get completely unexpectedly. So, I don't regard the work I do as hard at all. When I look at that veteran or that person in their bed, I've got so much out here today to look forward to and enjoy, and hopefully share um, with family, friends, patients, colleagues, and all that stuff that I don't know what it'll be, and I'll need to ask them what matters to them to be able to share it. But I know this stuff. I know this stuff. Yeah, so I don't think that answers the question as much as says, I don't know what it'll be to share a story that means something to you because you will probably be sharing a story with me as well. And I hope that happens.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, those are they're reasons why I like to hang out with people, not just my own age, but much older and much younger, for both all the give and take. And I think as you're talking there, it reminds me, when we get so focused in the here and now, we forget the lives that these people have already lived, all the things that are inside their experiences that that apply often as well today as they did 50 years ago or whenever the event happened, right? There's things to learn to bring forward that say around history that, the only thing certain about history is that we're going to repeat it over and over again. Things aren't nearly as new as we would like to imagine. How do you find, so one of the ways I teach is trying to help people connect with their values. We we throw words like values around like everyone knows what we're talking about. Like we throw aging around like we all know what we're talking about. And the reality is very few people actually know what aging is. I won't take you down that road today. But in terms of, uh, I think we all know we are a very materialistic society. That's not a surprise, and I don't want to suggest that's the big surprise here. But it is hard, I find, for people to understand what their values are, and it's often not until much later in life that values start to become clear when things start being taken away and we start to really crystallize around the things we value most. So talk to me about what you've seen and kind of experiences with people where they are kind of coming to terms with things that they value, or because I'm sure it varies by individual. Coming in, you don't know, right? When you show up, what stage they're at in this realization. Maybe it was 50 years ago. They had it all figured out. But I know there's also some who never figured out. So I'm guessing you kind of see both spectrums.
Yeah, I think recognizing that I think everyone's kind of battling to figure out something every day, to make choices for themselves every day, and then making sure that we kind of give each other space to do that hard work of making choices for for letting each person make their choices. And I think that's the huge part that has probably changed my professional practice the most is, yeah, if I see the person as a just as a patient with a problem to fix, and the problem is fine if it's just a cellulitis that just responds really well to antibiotics. But when it's a bigger problem, a chronic disease that turned out wasn't preventable, or accumulation of a whole bunch of things that's moving along with a person in their life, it's often easier for me to go to the place of what are your values about what matters to you? What have they been in the past? What matters now for you? And how do we plan the best possible year forward? Becomes a much easier question than me trying to say, hey, this leukemia of yours needs X, Y, and Z. Because if we just focus on the leukemia or the lung cancer or the diabetes, we lose the whole person that often has all these values and skills and stuff as part of the toolbox. And as soon as we say, you know what, I see you as a whole person. I want to walk next to you, shoulder to shoulder, and we look at the future together, where you've got your stuff, I've got my stuff. And when you've told me about your stuff, if my physician hat is useful, I'll pull it on. And that way, we'll have a clearer understanding of where your strengths are and the medical system strengths are, and my physician hat relationship strengths are. That actually becomes a dynamic thing versus me saying, you know what, this course of chemo will be really good for you. When in actual fact, I don't know what the future's got. If I knew that course of chemo is definitely going to be good, or the person's definitely going to survive or not survive a year, I would trade stocks because I'd have some knowledge about time and space that's far beyond a medical condition. So I have to be able to be uncomfortable in the uncertainty of I don't even know what'll be my tomorrow. Um, if I'm able to walk next to someone else in a way that says, what seems to be going on for you, and how do we marry your values and stuff like that, so we actually can plot something that says, what's the best possible year for you with the information we have available now? And that way it becomes a incredibly powerful collaboration of stuff like values, synergies, teamwork, and all that stuff. Pretty much like a marathon, like a good team functions, where the oncologist brings a skill set, the internal medicine person brings a skill set, the person's belief system, be it rabbi, pastor, friend, next door neighbor, wife, whatever, bring something to the table that says, this may work. How do we do it so that the person sleeps better tonight, eats better tonight, gets up tomorrow morning feeling a little bit better about the prospect going forward? Because we all do face hard choices as we go through life, but together we can do a much better job than currently, where we often have to face just the imperfection and then try and throw stuff at it, when in actual fact we've got so much more we can bring into the equation.
Right. And marry it up with, again, it kind of goes back to marry it up with the values that person has, which I'm sure becomes, so if I kind of ask, and maybe another way is, do values become more clear in that moment when someone is facing kind of the certainty of mortality is not a question of if, but just a question of some time frame of, which, again, we don't know what it is, but it's, well, we've got some serious diagnosis that clearly is going to affect the timeline of how long I'm going to be here. Don't it almost doesn't matter, right? Whether if it's an hour, obviously there's limited time, but if you got some time for choices and considerations, we're assuming there's some time. So maybe just kind of give me a sense of, again, this is a place we don't get windows into that you get a window into regularly. We are filled with uncertainty and anxiety around everything that comes to mind as soon as someone mentions a serious or potentially terminal diagnosis. So take me to, what are people's experience when you kind of start working with them through that phase of okay, it's real. We're going to talk about what's going forward. So what I'm trying to get is that mental and emotional state that they're at, that all of us on the outside would view as, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm not going to be able to do anything. I'm going to be focused on all the things I can't do anymore.
Yeah, and yeah, everyone's got a different mental picture of what we've just said, and I think, if I look back to where we started the conversation with Terry Fox, it's a very different description to what we'll often stereotypically see at the end of life, where the person's maybe now 80 or something. And but by the same token, I've written a lot of death certificates for people 40s and 50s that are a lot fitter and stronger than I have, but just suddenly out of the blue, there was a pancreas cancer or a bus accident or who knows
Right.
what.
Right.
And so you get to this thing of, it's not if, it's when. And when you're able to
I want to interrupt you there. Just say that again, because we forget that. We forget
so
that.
so as a small kid of say 7 or 8 years old, my dad was always saying, if I die, dot dot dot, put in his whatever the discussion was. I was like, yeah, even as a little kid, where you like Dad, isn't that, you're like, don't we all die? And it's like, when do we die? Because Bob or Mary or Uncle, whatever, he's not here anymore. So it's like, when we die. And the thing is, when we actually pivot in that thing of, how do we use our next time interval? Say we are training, we're not training, or whatever, or we looking forward to the summer to grow stuff. There's always a thing of like, how do we actually move into that space saying, you know what, I'm going to enjoy this and I'm going to share as much as I can because I share the enjoyment and we'll go forward in this together. And at some point, there may be life is 100% more fatal. So when we can plan for the best possible, say a week ahead, month ahead, or whatever, and I think the ideal is to be able to get to the position where we were able to say, you know what, now it makes sense for me to just plan a year ahead and tell your family about what a good year ahead would look like. But many times we haven't started doing that. And this is what I really love about your work. We should be doing this 10 years before we think we should be doing it, saying, well, you know what? I want the next decade to look like this. And if it changes, we'll update the data to say, okay, this bit of information is new. Let's look at this together. How does that fit with my decade plan? Because now it's different. And I think that's the really important part, changing to number one to when we die, and then being able to high five everyone in our circuit of people that says, gosh, I've managed to age in place. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's go for another year, another 6 months. Because often what I see at the end of life is people are trying to catch up on their living. And then it's often too late because now we're talking about moving beds into homes to make them comfortable in their homes, or they have to go to hospital because they can't do this at home. But they're often at the point of like, I want to get over this to do this, this, and this. Well, you know what? We at a different place now. Rather start now with the big high five of gratitude, and let's high five with gratitude every year we possibly can, going forward with a thing of like, you know what, this is another a big thank you. Part of my circle of people are supporting me and I'm supporting them to do something that's amazing. And I love it when I'm wrong about someone who's like, you know what, George, this may be your last month or 2 months or 3 months. And you know, I had a COPD patient who um, had really bad lungs, and I couldn't even hear him breathe when I listened to his chest. Just the hiss of oxygen through his cannula, and when I was like, yeah, this guy's almost dead. I look up and he's smiling at me. It's like, you know what? There's something keeping him alive here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the spirit of I'm comfortable being wrong about this stuff, but I do want the people to be able to say, you know what, I'm doing this on my terms. I'm smiling, and you know, when my time comes, I've lived my minutes to the full. I know when it comes, I want to look back and say, thank you, it was great. I
Yeah.
don't know where that took us, Scott, but
No,
you
no,
know,
it,
thank you
it's
for
it.
listening to the ramble.
These are no, it's good because that's part of what I think these conversations are because they are more abstract. They aren't as linear and as tidy as we would all like them to be. And I want to share with you. It's not a direct quote, but I just literally sometime this morning happened to see a little piece from Steve Jobs, and it was in the period after he'd left Apple, and there was a question around what he'd learned, kind of at that point in his life, and he took a long time before he answered the question. And what he had said was, and again, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he'd learned to look at people differently. And what he said, he was started to see people more as long-term contributors versus short-term fixes. And so, as opposed to seeing everything that was wrong with what they were doing today, he was seeing what they could do over the long term despite the things that they may not know today, the mistakes they are making today. And so where I take that is that if we get too focused on today, the today issues, it makes it really hard to step back and have perspective on a longer life. And okay, over that longer life, whether it's for myself or for you, um, what are some things that I can support you or myself that I'd really like to do? And so, how can I look beyond whatever is wrong with today? And there's every day we can look around and see all sorts of things wrong. And we can suggest all the causes and all the things that someone should be doing to fix them, because it's always somebody else, not me. Um, but step back and look at that longer range of life. And so that's where, again, in my teaching is trying to go to help people view what later life can be and where do you want to be in later life. And you hit it right. I think there was that point of, I want to be able to look back and say, I'm really happy with the choices I made and the things that I did. Right. But that needs to happen with some level of intention. Otherwise, you're just amazingly brilliant and just know all the right things to do every day. But again, those of us who've done some endurance realize, no, it takes a bit of planning, a bit of practice, some routine every day to build it up with some idea of where you're trying to go with all of this. And that's, again, kind of circling back to that endurance thing. We have a way of being able to see endurance sport as parallels for life. And so it's that practice. But if we don't have, and you don't have to do endurance sport, but you do have to find a way to practice that. I think is that fair? Kind of what you're from the outside looking in terms of what you would be talking about to people in your language.
Oh gosh, yeah. I often hear of folk who are maybe 65, 75, doing phenomenal, say a marathon. And it's like, wow, you know what, this person's still able to hold a 14K an hour pace at age X, where I managed to do that at age 36 to just squeeze in under 3. And this person's still able to do that. It's like, yeah, I wonder what they could have done at that age. But the main thing is they signed up. And that's, yeah, at some stage they decided, hell, you know what? I'm going to sign up. And often I find that's the challenge. If we don't sign up to our lives earlier, we might as well say today's a good day to sign up. And yet, for me, often the hardest part of any day or marathon is actually to say, let me have a look at what I'm going to sign up to. Because if I get to the start line, it's actually okay to fail in the run because you've signed up and done, you've lived life until you failed, and you're probably going to learn something even into the fail. And you never know. I'd rather drop dead in a marathon than, there's less pleasant ways of dying at the end of life. And so, why not just sign up to what you really love and do daily and in the longer term? So I haven't signed up to a marathon for a while, but I'm looking for one where I can literally do my usual very slow pace and enjoy, hopefully, getting to the start, enjoying the people along the route, and crossing the line, having said, you know what, that was the best thing I could have done today, sore muscles and all.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question on that, but and I just want to kind of underline again, because again, if you don't know endurance, you won't understand what the nuance of what Greg just talked about was. What's involved between now and showing up at the start line is actually the bigger part of all of this, right? It's not the marathon day. The marathon, I kind of describe it's like the icing on the cake, that event. It's really all the things that lead up to it and all the things you discover about yourself along the way. So it's again, it goes back to that committing to something bigger than you. The marathon, whatever it is bigger than any of us. That's part of what makes it so exciting. It's the uncertainty of, can I do it? Right? Testing you, and then every day you go out and say, I'll give you the example. I remember I was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, doing the Ironman there. It was my second, and I remember standing on the beach as we were getting ready to go on and thinking, again, I have no way of imagining how I'm going to be able to do this. I had done it already before, and I'd done lots of training, but it's still that when you face big challenges, these are things inevitably that uncertainty creeps in, and you just say, okay, one step in front of the other, break it down into the piece I can do. So whether it's the mile at a time or whatever, with some goal and some discipline around what you'll know it'll take to get to the end. But those are fun things. So you asked me before we came on the air what I was planning for, and I'll answer that. But I first want to ask you. So do you have anything on your event list that you've signed up for or are planning to?
I was kind of worried you're going to ask that. I quite often sign up for different aspects of a race, quite local to here, called the Sinister Seven. So I've done all kinds of
Oh,
different parts of it.
doesn't that sound pleasant? About as
So
appealing as the death race, yeah.
yeah, it's very close to that sort of idea, and the profile map is quite fearsome. It's like almost feel like you should have hooves or something to do it. But it's so much fun. It is so much fun. So I've done just about every different leg of it, and I did the 50 mile about 2 years ago. And I'm wondering about signing up to the 50K this year because I do want to do a good garden. And that's probably going to mean I do the 50K with a lot of gardening training, which means I changed my shoes for the day. And so, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to sign up for that, or I'll do something a little bit later, in maybe August or September. But I'm going to do something because I normally do one or two standards or longer each year. So I don't have one yet, but if you get back to me in a month's time, I'll have one or two.
Okay, well, I've planted the seed for you. I'm debating doing the nationals half marathon, but the at the masters level, but they haven't announced the location yet, so I don't know what's going on. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. Um,
But I'm always in awe of your times because you run these things hard. That's absolutely phenomenal. I love it.
I,
Thanks for keeping us posted.
it's just a if all is going well, it's a beautiful space to be in. There's not a you understand as having done a sub 3 marathon. If people didn't pick that up, that he dropped in there earlier. The yeah, it's a joy to feel that speed and unfold and be able to sustain it. It's the connection of mind and body. That's what's exciting about it, right? You're just doing inventory on the body. Let me, if you're willing, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions for you here. Okay, these are really short answers, and if we don't like it, we'll edit them out. I promise. Okay. One word you hope people associate with aging.
Hope.
A value you think is underrated.
Caring.
What's one small daily habit you believe makes a big difference?
Being present.
Something older adults understand better than the rest of us.
Time.
What's harder for most people, forgiving others or forgiving themselves?
Both.
A lesson you wish everyone could learn earlier in life.
Count one steamboat, two steamboat. What's going on? Yeah, steamboat.
Good. Most beautiful place you've ever sat with a patient or their family.
In his garden. He was my gardening mentor. I sat with him in his garden.
Beautiful. When you think about your own life 20 years from now, what's one thing you hope to have done?
Inspired people to recognize what matters to me as in their life. Do what matters to them now. Share it.
Yeah, those are the no more rapid fire, so you can relax. And that last one, I think, I mean, they all really sum it up nicely. But it is a like when we think about like what do doctors do? We don't pause to think about like how you answer that last question. That's what doctors do, and healthcare workers, nurses, um, they have tools of the trade and processes they need to go through. But ultimately, that's very common amongst the healthcare professional community, and it's why I enjoy having you as a friend and being able to have you on the show to talk about it and to help people identify better with their medical professionals and learn from people like you who uh, bring such wisdom. Right? You bring the wisdom of others to us, and I think that's something clearly I see in your own life. But that's again, it goes back to that's what you're trying to distribute out to the world is the things that you've learned from others who have clearly had many, many more years, collectively than any one of us. Again, bigger than any one of us will ever do. It's a, it's wonderful to think about that stage in life. I think in the way you describe it. So maybe you can kind of give us some final thoughts around how we might think about um, the rest of our lives in terms of what do we want to do with that, and how should we think about our aging process as one built on hope, as you describe, um, to live a better life in the months and years that we have in front of us.
That's a great question. I think the thing that I've learned from my time as a person experiencing my own life and wearing a physician hat and watching other people live theirs is life gives life. And the more I can actually give away stuff on and about living, for people to live a full life, I get stuff back. And then it becomes like an economy of giving and sharing stuff that's becomes much more about the giving than actually getting stuff back. And yet you actually always got more. And so it's an amazing space. And I kind of go back to the start of where we started with this, with our journeys together and Terry Fox and stuff like that. There's always an exchange of what's happening here that we can keep on sharing and saying, that worked, that didn't work. That worked, that didn't work. And so, life is amazing if we actually let it happen and then learn from it, because we can make more with far less and enjoy it tons more. That's all I got.
Perfect. I think you nailed it. Thank you, sir. A great conversation. I just, it's these are fun conversations to have, and if we can help people to get more comfort around it, I think again you've given it to many out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time today, and I can't say it enough, but I love the way you come at stuff, and I wish I had the gift of, I'm going to say, somewhere between English and awareness and stuff like that. You've got it, and I'm learning.
Well, thank you. I think you and I are very similar mindsets. You mentioned curious. That's one of the values. I only choose 3 values for each foundation around healthy aging, and one is curiosity. And so, that's anyway, no, it's just, there's a ton to learn, and so no, thank you.
Thanks.
Take good care. Thanks so much.
Care.
Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye now.
Hope you enjoyed today's show. Great to have you part of our over 10,000 strong WealthSpan community. Remember to subscribe if you'd like to learn about our upcoming shows. And as always, make sure you provide some feedback, whether that's a thumbs up or a comment, a question. They're all welcome. If you'd like to subscribe to our quarterly newsletter, you can do that at wealthspan.com. We're always looking for show ideas, or maybe you think you'd like to be a guest. Again, please reach out to book a motivational talk or inquire about our leadership workshops. Email me at info@wealthspan.com. Until next time, stay engaged, stay curious, and take good care of you and those in your care.